The situation in Ukraine now, and 5 hours of peace talks have been held between Ukraine and Russia, with the world on edge over Russia's decision to put its nuclear deterrence on standby. Europe correspondent Isabella Higgins has more from Lviv in western Ukraine.
Air raid sirens go off around the city, and because air raid strikes have been intensifying here in the country, there was quite a frantic energy today. Everyone rushed downstairs in this hotel and we were escorted into a basement. Now, some days, a couple of days ago, that air raid siren went off seven times. Today we thought we were having a quieter day, but then as people were sitting down to eat dinner, as night fell, it happened again. Now, we were given the all clear within 45 minutes, but as I say, this is starting to become part of the pattern of daily life in this city, and it's a reminder that while we may not be right there in the conflict zone, we are very much living in a country in war, and that there are threats all the time. I don't think anyone was overly optimistic about what was going to come out of those talks, and it's really played out the way many people expected, and that's that there's been no firm resolution from those talks. We understand that Ukraine went into that with demands like not only a ceasefire, but also for Russia to withdraw its troops from all Ukrainian territory, including Crimea and the Donbass region. It's hard to imagine a world where Russia would have accepted those conditions. The Kremlin has been quiet about what it was asking for. So all we really know is that both parties have gone back to their capitals, that they're discussing these, and we understand they will meet again in the coming days. The other reason why it was so hard to believe that there could be some sort of resolution from those talks, or why people weren't feeling optimistic at all, is because this happened as airstrikes, as fighting intensified, particularly in places like Kharkiv in the city's east. There's been some devastating images of residential apartment blocks that have been ruined. There's a lot of fears for how many casualties are in that city. It's had intense fighting on its street for days now. Some residents in Kyiv said they saw the loudest and brightest explosions, the closest they've been to that city. So that's another reason why people just weren't feeling optimistic about those talks today.
The United Nations General Assembly is holding an emergency meeting on Ukraine. North America correspondent Barbara Miller joins us now from Washington. So Barbara, talk us through what's happening there.
Well, this is only the 11th time in 70 years that the General Assembly has held such an emergency session. This follows an attempt last week to get a resolution through the Security Council, that's the 15-member body, condemning Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Russia has veto power in that body, so that resolution actually never stood a chance of getting through. So the matter has essentially been referred to the General Assembly, which is expected later this week to vote on a similar motion. 193 members in that body, and they all have a chance to address the General Assembly with their views on the current situation in Ukraine. We heard from the Russian representative who blamed Ukraine for the situation they find themselves in. The representative saying that Ukraine had violated the terms of the Minsk agreement, and that's why they find themselves in this situation. He was also scathing of Western countries who are delivering weapons to Ukraine, saying that they are shamelessly inundating Ukraine with their weapons. We heard, of course, also from Antonio Guterres, the UN Secretary General, who called on Russia to immediately end hostilities. He said not only were civilians being targeted, but this was possibly going to cause the worst humanitarian and refugee crisis Europe had seen in decades. Antonio Guterres saying enough is enough. This is largely a symbolic meeting. The resolution, if it's passed, won't be legally binding, but what the international community is trying to do with this meeting is to signal to Russia and to the world that they are isolated with this military action in Ukraine.
And Barbara, there's been some drama at a meeting of the Security Council over the expulsion by the US of some Russian diplomats.
That's right, a Security Council meeting happening in tandem also about Ukraine. The Russian representative there said that 12 Russian diplomats had been asked to leave the US by March the 7th, and he described that as a hostile act. The US rep then got up, essentially confirming that was the case, but saying that these diplomats had been engaged in espionage activities. The White House spokeswoman Jen Psaki was asked about this. She said, the timing's interesting given the war in Ukraine. She said this move had been a long time in the making.
Today's action has been in the works for several months. The United States informed the United Nations and the Russian mission to the United Nations that we were beginning the process of expelling 12 intelligence operatives from the Russian mission who had abused their privileges of residency in the United States by engaging in espionage activities that are adverse to our national security. So it takes some time to make those evaluations, and that, again, those actions were in the works for months.
So not sure, Roz, if we'll see the kind of tit-for-tat action that we've seen in the past with these kind of expulsions. Jen Psaki was asked about the comments that this was a hostile act. She said the only hostile act was by the diplomats themselves by engaging in what the US says were espionage activities.